Alrighty. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Natalie Lavery from Climate People, which is a climate recruitment agency. If this is your first MCJ and Climate People Climate Career Advancement Meetup, welcome. We host these sessions every single month to introduce as many people to the climate jobs world as possible and deliver actionable climate job insights to hopefully help position all of you in this space, and with the end goal of getting more people working in climate. So with that, we're super excited to have Michael here today alongside all of you to talk about the power of networking. Michael wrote the book, Your Invisible Network, and is going to give an hour presentation today on the insights from that book and how having a strong network of people on your side can be monumental in your job search. So Michael, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to talk to all of us today. We're super excited to have you and can't wait to learn alongside you. So with that, I'm going to let Michael share his screen and take it from here.
Yeah.
But
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for giving me that intro. I also want to say a special thank you to Cassie Decker, who is in California and a longtime friend and the person who suggested that we make this connection. So speaking of the power of connections, I have been an executive coach for 20 years. I had numerous other careers before then, but this is the one that stuck. And in coaching, we're really working on how we get to the next level of leadership, of career. It could be a team, it could be an individual, it could be an organization, but really how to get from here to there. And it is often a combination of what we call technical skills, like here are the things you do, and then adaptive, which is what assumptions do I need to question? How am I getting in my own way? The person I used to be, how much of that person is still relevant now, and how much of a new person do I need to be? So it's really a combination of all of that. One reason I wrote a book on this subject is that in 20 years of coaching, I would say that 70% of what I've done ends up being about relationships or communications. And this isn't simply about business development or finding your next thing or getting to know people in your company. It's also relates to things like being strategic and making hard decisions and conducting change leadership or change management. A lot of things that are considered more hard skills actually have a very strong relational background. And what I noticed is that we all kind of know that this is important. We kind of feel we should meet more people and network. We kind of believe that it is either critical or at least very helpful to our career, and that it may even be beneficial to other people. But what does that really mean at the end of the day? What should I do today? How much should I be doing? And when can I stop? And also, what if I feel weird while I'm doing this? How do I interpret that? So that's why I wrote this book, to demystify this whole thing a bit. Essentially, in the book and today, I talk about the horizontal and the vertical dimensions of this. So horizontal is, how do we get beyond a small cluster of known people and move into the less visible parts of our network? How do we connect with new people? How do we reach out to what we'll call weak ties? How do I connect with somebody who I feel I don't have that much in common with, or perhaps who I never would have picked as a friend? Is there an authentic way of doing that, right? So how can we do all that? And then there's a vertical. That is, what is a relationship? It's more than a like on Instagram. It's more than a connection on LinkedIn. How do we actually go deeper and move out of the transactional space into the more relational space? And therefore, I created this book. And then what I'm going to share today is kind of an overall strategy, if you will, and then some key insights that once you hear them will seem very obvious, but which most people don't have, that I think will be a great reset for your own job hunting and relationship building activities. So we will touch on that, but essentially we're kind of taking a beat. Let's just figure out what we're really doing here and why is it important and how can we be good at it. We're going to have a little discussion in a moment, but I want to share for the younger ones a kind of funny commercial that used to be on television. So in the 1980s, there was something called the Hair Club for Men, which was, I believe, a kind of wig company, but not called that. And it had infomercials all the time about men, take charge of your hair. And the president was named Cy Sperling. Hi, I'm Cy Sperling. And at the end of every infomercial, he would say, Hair Club for Men. I'm not only the president, I'm also a member. And that is how I feel about my book. So I wrote this whole book. This is what I've done. I've seen a lot in my clients' careers and my own, but I'm still a human being. And so I still have these kind of weird feelings and hesitations and all the stuff that we'll talk about today. But I also kind of know what I should probably do about those. So it's not like I no longer feel that way. It's just that I'm able to kind of accept it and say, yeah, I'm actually an audience for my book as well. So we'll talk more about that. So we're gonna part of the intention of what this book is about is how can we get more out of our day-to-day interactions? How can we deepen them? How can we make them more meaningful? So we're going to start with the discussion in breakouts because I want you to have the chance to meet each other. I know you have like some fantastic Slack resources and ability to connect, but there's nothing like talking to real people. So I'm going to give you these two questions. What's something in the climate world you're excited about? And then what's something you actually like doing at work, like a task or activity as opposed to a passion for a cause? So in a moment, we are going to put you into breakout groups with people from all around the world. And I'm just going to drop this into the chat now so that we have the questions. And we'll give you about 8 minutes to have a conversation with each other, and then we'll come back and we'll go through the rest of the presentation.
Okay, awesome. I'm putting y'all into breakout rooms now. Michael, you're in one, but just don't go.
Okay.
Unless you want to. All right, all the rooms are open, so y'all should be able to click join on those now. Welcome back. Welcome back.
Pouring back in.
Now we're seeing the numbers come back.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. I stopped into a couple sessions, heard some great ideas. What I'd love you to do is in the chat, just please write down either answer to one of the questions, something you're excited about in the climate world, very briefly, and what's something you actually like to do, just so we can all benefit from this. And I'm going to urge everybody to just turn on your camera for a couple moments. I understand there may be kids or dishes to be washed, or maybe in a car or what have you, but it's really great for everyone else to be able to see real faces. And again, you can choose your moments. It's not completely required. So why do I start with these questions? Well, I understand that many of you are looking for jobs or thinking about the next thing down the road. And when we do that, it is so easy to focus on our backgrounds, what we've accomplished, what we think we need to convey. And as we'll talk about later, there's so much power in starting with your passions and interests. It's a great way to connect. It's a lot more fun to connect with somebody about their interest and passion rather than what they've done for the last 15 years. And people can also learn from that. I mean, I learned lots of cool stuff about algae and kelp just now. I had no idea. So I love that people shared me with their passions. And then the other thing is that the second question is about what we call competencies. So competencies are your skills, your knowledge, your traits. It's what you actually do in the job. And that is probably the major factor in job satisfaction. It's also a major way for people to understand how to plug you in. So while passion can be great as a kind of emotional connector, at the end of the day, it's like what you actually like to do that will make a difference in terms of being happy and giving people an idea how to slot you in. So I'm going to jump into the normal presentation here, which is interactive. Hold on. There it is. Share screen. Okay. All right. So this book, what does it really amount to? Relationships are a form of wealth. They are a form of wealth as much as money or any other material asset. Your network, to a large degree, is your net worth. You can build this wealth even if you start with nothing. Every society in the world teaches how to build relationships. Everybody has an ability to connect with others. Some people may have a little bit of a head start, but it doesn't foreclose the idea that you can actually create the relationships you want at any stage of life. And once you have it, nobody can take away this. This kind of relational wealth goes with you throughout your career. And the interesting thing is that unlike money, you don't really spend it down. If you're good at it, there are ways of making requests, of leveraging, of accessing, of trying to get things from people that can actually deepen the relationships. That can be reciprocal and make them even stronger and more powerful. Relationships are how you connect your value to the world. So you may be an expert marine biologist, but if the only people who know about that are your supervisor and your colleague and 4 people who read a research paper, that is just somewhat limiting. Relationships are how we access information and also opportunities. So opportunities aren't tethered to clouds, they're tethered to people. Now, interestingly, we live in a very algorithmic type of society where it seems that algorithms can do pretty much anything. Like I could talk about buying some new penny loafers, and sure enough, in 10 minutes, my Gmail inbox will start having ads for penny loafers. So surely if I'm just really good at my job, the world will come to me. Well, not really. Merit is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Relationships are also how we find well-being, because there's nothing we do more than work. And therefore, if our relationships are reciprocal, if they're mutual, if we understand each other, if we feel heard, if we can hear other people, it means that we're much more likely to have a good work life. And finally, relationships acquire value over time. It's almost like the power of compound interest. Generally speaking, as you rise, the people you know will tend to become more senior. They'll tend to have more connections, but they still may remember you at the time that they met you. So there's an interesting phenomenon where if you simply maintain relationships with people, let's say in your cohort, however you define that, it can kind of drag you along to success. So an example might be you have this fantastic and incredibly elaborate Slack world that I've been poking around a little bit in. Even if you're not doing anything right now, as far as looking for the next thing, simply by being part of that and connecting and getting to know people could serve you in 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years, or perhaps tomorrow. This is a picture that is hard to look at. I did it on purpose. I wrote this whole book. It's pretty practical. There are a lot of exercises. But in the end, I thought, it's really a book about discomfort. So there's discomfort built in to this whole project of trying to deepen and broaden our relationships. And I'll tell you why I think it occurs. On the one hand, we know that relationships are important. We know that other people can help us. We can help other people. We don't want to live in a vacuum, particularly in a newer field like climate and alternate energy and all these types of things. We're going to find out a lot by just connecting with people. So we want to do that. And the whole point of my work is for you to activate things. Like you're the activating agent. You're going to reach out rather than kind of waiting patiently for the right person to reach out to you. But on the other hand, we don't want to feel weird. We don't want to be excluded. And I believe this is because we evolved to live in groups. So it's bad enough when you're not invited to somebody's party or a meeting. But imagine 50,000 years ago, if you're cast out by your small group and sent off to live in the forest by yourself, you're not going to survive very long. So I feel like we're always trying to be aware of not going over the line. Like what would be too much? What would be too pushy? What would be too me? And therein lies a discomfort, because we want to do something, but we also don't want to do something that feels bad. And I can tell you, every single person in this room could think of an example of a sort of networker they've seen who just seemed like too much. Like, I just can't be that person. That's not me. And so we don't want to do that, and hence the discomfort. Now, my belief is that the discomfort is almost always part of it. I feel it myself sometimes. And it's, what do we do with this? Do we label it as, oh, I feel weird, I feel like I'm imposing, They might not want to talk to me. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, or maybe I'm not quite what I need to be to move forward. Like, do we kind of dig into that scab and pick at it? Or do we think, well, discomfort means I'm stretching myself. It means I'm growing. It means I'm trying something that I didn't try yesterday. And therefore, the way I'm going to label it is, yay for me, I get a gold star, because I went to this kind of event where I felt a little anxious, but I went anyway. Or I reached out to somebody and I didn't really know if they would respond. And when they didn't respond, I tried again, and then they did. Or I got up and talked about myself, even though I felt a bit nervous whether it was coming off well. Or you know what? I asked somebody for feedback on my resume, and I asked them to say, what obstacles am I going to face trying to get in? That was kind of hard for me. So this kind of discomfort means you're growing. And as an adult, things are hard before they're fun. And things are hard and often somewhat tedious before you see results. So it's the meaning of discomfort that is the key thing here. So let's decide that we get gold stars and A's when we make ourselves uncomfortable. Not to a debilitating degree, but what somebody has called a 15% risk. Let me do 15% more than I would normally do here. I want to take an overview of what relationships are, and then we're going to look into some specific truths and some communications types of exercises. So relationships grow over time through ongoing exchange. You can give, you can receive, you can share. There's a reciprocity. It's usually not exact. So what you do for me might be far bigger than what I can do for you right now. But I can listen. I can be polite. I can follow up. And perhaps one day down the road, I can provide that role. Or I can do it for somebody else. Relationships are not just transactional. So transactional is when you just call the person to get the thing, or they do the same for you. Relational is we actually get to know people. We have some exchange over time. We understand each other. Now, I feel that most of our relationships in the work world are transactional. That's not because we're bad. It's just we're trying to get stuff done and be efficient. And we're all trying to do the same thing. And we feel like we don't have enough time. And one of the things I did in this book, and there'll be a download in a few moments you can get, is to break it all down to just 20-minute activities, 20 minutes or less, just small things you can do to kind of break out of this transactional world and deepen. Relationships also grow through something called bids. A bid is a communication that I would like to take this relationship further. So if I see Leonie in the office or Natalie, I'm like, hey, I'm going to get coffee. You want to go get coffee with me? I could just be saying, hey, we're tired. Let's get some coffee. We like coffee. It could also be, hey, Natalie, I'd kind of like to get to know you better a bit, or I'd like this relationship to take one step farther, right? And perhaps she can go then, or perhaps that's not a great time. A good response is that honors the bid is, oh, that's nice. I'm kind of swamped right now. I have 5 calls coming up, then I have to run off. But I know next week I'm going to have more time. Maybe we can just take a walk at lunch and we can catch up. So that is kind of how you renegotiate a bid. So over time, we want to provide more bids, and we also want to respond to them and recognize what the bids are. You have tons of relationships in your life. So what are you supposed to do on any given day? The idea I have is there are 7 types of relationships you need, and they're described here. And over time, we want to attend to all of those. You could do a little gap analysis and ask yourself, all right, where am I strong? Where am I weaker? What do I want to focus on this month? And perhaps there may be 3 or 4 names or a dozen, depending on your ambitions, that you're going to focus on this month. And that's really how it is. It doesn't have to be the best system. It doesn't have to be a great system. It just has to be a sense of, okay, over time, these are the relationships I'm developing. I'm not going to say more about this here. In a few slides, I'm going to give you a download where you can download a description I've done about this whole thing and how this all works. All right. So, oops. Okay. So 3 ideas to share with you today. So the first one is called the strength of weak ties. And if anybody has heard of this idea before, oops. Sorry, I'm trying to look at people at the same time that I'm doing this, which is hard. If anybody has done this, knows what this is, Put a comment in the chat, like what strength of weak ties means. I'm just kind of curious, like who's come across this idea. So this is an idea that was pioneered in the 70s by a man named Mark Granovetter. Yes, Michael Tumianello. That's it. Mark Granovetter was a grad student at Stanford, and he was looking at how people use their social networks to get jobs. He divided the research subjects according to their weak ties and their strong ties. So a strong tie is somebody that you have ongoing connection with. You see them, you can send them a Slack message, you can call them up, you might do stuff with them. Friends, colleagues, family members, a buddy, personal trainer, whoever. And the idea is you have ongoing exchange here, so it's pretty easy to have a conversation or make a request or make that bid. Weak ties is everybody else in the world. Also loose ties. So there are two categories of weak ties. The first is people who you don't know very well, who you've met one or two times or have seen. So for example, you can say that for all of you, I am now kind of weak tie because we haven't actually interacted formally, but we have a connection. Like you could write to me and say, hey, Michael, you said this thing about blah, blah, blah. And I would recognize you as part of this group that I now have a connection with, or I might do the same with you, right? But we haven't really been that, intimate. And the other type of weak tie is people you once knew who you're no longer in touch with. So your roommate from 10 years ago, or a person you used to go jogging with 5 years ago, or your first boss, or a professor who really kind of seemed to understand you, but the last time you talked to her was when you asked for a letter of recommendation, right? So alumni connections. Basically, in his research, weak ties were more powerful than strong ties. The people who relied on their weak ties got more jobs, they had higher salaries, and they had greater job satisfaction. And there are some reasons for this. The first is that weak ties have different information from you. So when you're in a cohort, you will tend to have the same information that everybody else does, and you might have the same way of thinking about it. This is why, for example, if you have just graduated from college or business school or law school, it's somewhat limiting to only talk to people who are in the same position because they're going to have the same information and possibly the same anxieties and may even see you as a competitor. Whereas weak ties will have different information, like the Twitter echo chamber, right? Very tiny, tiny world. Weak tie. So like, I'm a weak tie and we're having this kind of conversation and I feel like I'm cognizable because I've been doing something for the last 20 years that is probably different from what a lot of you have been doing. Similarly, if I talk to a bunch of coaches about ocean restoration, kelp farming, like that's going to be a very short-lived speculative conversation because we don't know anything, right? Much better to connect with people like you. And as somebody actually said, Wes pointed out, strong ties can be limiting in some ways. They can be good for very high trust requests, but they often are vested in who you are right now. So they kind of like it that you're an equities research analyst at Morgan Stanley, or they enjoy talking about your work as a teacher or a lawyer. They may not think it's such a great idea for you to do something else. They may also have loving doubts because they remember you from a past state. And they may not have kept up. It's kind of like high school. Like it's a little bit hard to change your reputation within high school. It's much easier to just go to college or go to another place. So there's a lot of energy with weak ties. And therefore, the most important single thing you can do is to reach out to weak ties and essentially try to bring them in a little bit. And, there's some discomfort in this, but there's a benefit for both of you. So let's do this. I'd love you to just spend 2 minutes and jot down the name of 5 or 6 weak ties. Don't overthink it. It could be in any part of your life. They don't even have to have anything to do with climate. Just write down some names. And then pick one of them that you're willing to reach out to today. And I would love if you could put in chat sort of a veiled manner who you'd reach out to. So I'm going to write my friend Greg, who is a coach in Spain. We connect once a year about stuff. All right, I can do that. I like talking to Craig, but I haven't done it for a year plus. but why not? It's a weak tie. Let's see where that goes. Give you a moment to write down some names. All right, Vianney. Yes, all those UCLA contacts get in there. Okay, so strength and weak ties. Next idea, the impossibility of prediction. So while I recommend this overall strategy of a relationship portfolio, it's a somewhat loose strategy. It's like, here are the general contours of how to do it. But beyond that, I would recommend you don't spend too much time pre-qualifying who is going to be useful. In other words, okay, you might have a list of, okay, these are some powerful people, these are some friendly people, these are some former colleagues, here's a famous person I would like to connect with. But don't get too wrapped up in any one person being the thing, because you cannot predict who will be most helpful to you. There are people who you know really well, who you have great trust with, perhaps you've done a lot for them, who won't be useful. There are people who seem very powerful and interesting, and nothing will come from that. It's not that they're bad. It's just that there's no chemistry, or it just didn't happen at that moment in time. On the other hand, there are people you will meet through completely random circumstances, who you have only the slightest connection with, who you might think actually have nothing to do with your aims. But those people can be incredibly powerful, because there is you don't exactly know how they're connected, and they may play a powerful role as an intermediary. So not so much the end user, but the person who's talking about you. And an example of this would be, like, somebody asked me, what are the kind of secret networking places? I'm like, well, I'll give you two. Number one, any playground in any major city in the US or Europe, and probably elsewhere, where parents are just standing around watching their kids play, and with other parents. Guess what they talk about? They talk about careers, because they're all like married or with lawyers or doctors or climate people or scientists. Dog parks, excellent one, right? And they can be connected all over, and that's why you want to be able to communicate in a way that allows them to represent you, even if they have nothing to do with your area. And the other thing is, I can only speak for New York, but I would say New York doctors and dentists are so connected, and they love talking about careers, and they love giving advice. So the next time you go to your eye doctor or ophthalmologist, or the same thing, I guess, or a plastic surgeon, or get a colonoscopy or whatever, talk about your career. They love talking about this stuff. I guarantee you'll get some good leads. Okay. The second thing is, you can't really predict how any one conversation will go. This is what I call minute 32. Minute 32 represents the idea that a conversation is chemistry in action. So you have your thoughts, they have their thoughts, but when you combine them, there's a spark, it's something different. 1 + 1 could be 2, 1 + 1 could also be 7 or 23, because it's two chemical agents interacting. And what happens in a conversation is, you kind of go through your stuff, they go through their stuff, and then at a certain point you will sometimes discover amazing, unpredictable stuff. Like, you're both Bruins or Bruins fans, or you went to the same summer camp 20 years ago, or a really great audiologist, or they know an actually good Mexican restaurant in New York City, which I can assure you is a hard thing to find. Or they have some similar passion. So I'll just give one example of this. I had a client named Lauren Bayer, who ran for Congress in the US a couple of years ago. And I thought, all right, I'm gonna help fundraise. I want to help you out, even though I'd never really done this. And I knew one very wealthy person who I happened to know gave a lot of money. And so I went to see him. I'm like, Peter, why don't you meet Lauren Bayer? I think she's the next big thing, and she's running. And I kind of indicated that I knew who was involved. does a lot of Democratic Party donations, and he said, okay, well, actually, I don't give money in primaries. I'm like, what? No, my policy. I don't want to kind of donate where people are fighting against each other. But but since I know you, I'll talk to her. As long as she understands I do not donate in primaries. I'm like, okay, fine. Introduce them. A couple months later, I get an invitation to this fundraiser for Lauren Baer's campaign held at the sumptuous Central Park West Parkview apartment of this gentleman. I'm like, what happened there? Okay, well, they met. And what did they discover? They discovered that they have a mutual passion for the University of Michigan Wolverines, the sports team. I had no idea about this. I mean, I kind of knew this guy was into sports, but it's not something that I tend to remember. And Lauren was not from Michigan. She was from Florida and currently living in New York. I'm like, how did this happen? Well, it turns out people in her family are super big Wolverines fans. And when you're a Wolverines super fan, that comes first. That was enough to change this guy's lifetime policy toward donation. So that's a Minute 32 thing. Now, the thing is, you can't predict when this will happen. It's not everything. I would say in 10 conversations, 3 of them are going to be really good. You discover something unusual or unexpected. 5 of them will be kind of okay, a little meh, but professional. You take notes and you'll, follow up and so forth. And 2 will be kind of hard, a little painful, kind of a date where a second in, you're like, check, please, like, wow, this is not going well. So again, how do we interpret that? You could say like, oh, why can't I meet good people? Or you could say, great, now I have one of the 2, check it on the list. Probably the next one is going to be some amazing conversation. So be generally committed to doing this, but not super obsessed with any one outcome. All right. Idea 3 is social contagion. Social contagion is an idea from Nicholas Christakis, who teaches at Yale. And what it means is that people in our kind of outer networks, people we don't even know, but who might know people that know us, like your friends, or your neighbor's parents' boss, or your boss's child care worker's sister, what they do actually affects all of us. So what other people do affects our behaviors, it affects our thoughts, it affects our emotions. So for example, how fast people walk is a product of social contagion. How we vote, whether we do vaccines, our attitude towards fitness, so many things that we think of are purely us are actually from this larger factor of social contagion. And so the way I interpret this is that if you want to change your life, you could set a goal, or alternately, you can shift your network. And shifting your network doesn't mean you're dumping a bunch of people. It just means I'm going to deliberately start hanging out with others. That's how I succeeded in writing this book in a fairly short period of time compared with other projects. I actually started only listening to podcasts by writers or about writing. I was kind of stuck and I needed some way of getting out of it. And it started affecting how I thought about this and the tools I would use and the targets I would set and even how I would imagine success. So you pick an idea or an area you want to improve in, and then you just try to hang out more in that network. You can meet people, or you can even hover. Like the MCJ Slack group is a fantastic way to let the contagion come to you. Just start spending time there and see how it affects you. Okay, those are the 3 things I kind of wanted to share. And let's talk a little bit about communications. Oh, first, a little break. I have a non-public page on my website. It's michaelmelcher.com/7relationships. And if you go there, you can download 2 handouts that I think are useful. One is on the 7 types of relationships, and the other is an example of 10 potential 20-minute activities, just to kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. So feel free to take a screenshot, look that up if you wish. All right. So we're going to talk about reaching out and communications. There are 2 types of reaching out, a kind of request type thing, and then what I'll call a ping. So new connection. Hey, Michael, I really enjoyed your presentation for Climate People, MCJ. I'd love to keep the connection on LinkedIn. Very light touch. It's something though. I'll say yes. So I'm just telling you that right now. It's up to you. It's low hanging fruit. You can do that, right? And then an example of a somewhat a stronger request. Hey, Petra, hope you're doing well. It's been a long time since college, but I regularly follow you on LinkedIn. So this is a weak tie, no connection for a while. I'm reaching out because I wonder if I could share some of your wisdom. I'm planning my next act. And one area I'm exploring is alternate energy investment. At this point, I'm educating myself about what these jobs are actually like. I want to get grounded on this before I do more specific targeting. Would you have time for a short chat in the next few weeks? So you're actually asking for something there from someone who's a weak tie. They might say yes, they might say no, but you're making it very clear. You're also making it, if they're willing to put the time, a bit easier to say yes to, because you're not saying, could you intervene and get me a job? You're like, let's talk. I would value your wisdom. All right. And there are a ton of examples of how to make different types of asks. It's really an art. It's not obvious necessarily. And so if you choose to get my book, there's tons there. And I will occasionally send out emails and so forth with a lot of this content. All right. Now, the ping. That's kind of my favorite thing these days. A ping is a one-way message. It is a message that you send without an expectation of a return. It's part of the maintaining and deepening relationships. And it's thinking of you. And by the way, this is what holiday cards were for decades and decades and decades. Once a year, you write a little note. You're not expecting a response right away, if ever. Just sharing, thinking about you. Here's a little bit about me. So people like these because everybody lives in a world of undone tasks or flagged emails or chores that we feel a little bit bad we haven't done. So if you send a message to somebody that is just thinking of you, or here's a cool resource, it's like a little bonbon. It's like a little bonbon, and they like it. And often they will respond, and it reminds them of who you are, but it also reminds you of this relationship that you had. You can also knock them out really quickly. Waiting for kids drop off, before a meeting starts, while waiting for group 4 to board on United Airlines flight to Raleigh, Durham, God help you, waiting, right? So a couple examples. Hey, I passed our favorite food truck and thought of you. It's so rainy. Wish I had some of the LA sunshine. Note that Carl does not say, let's catch up soon, right? There's a second example of a resource you have. Here's a video clip. Here's an article. Here's a download. Here's a TED Talk. People enjoy seeing those. So what I'd like you to do now is spend 2 minutes and send a ping to somebody, to anybody. Just write a short message. And remember, you're not going to say, let's catch up soon. You're just going to say you're thinking of them. And then I would love for a few people to put them in the chat, because it's fun to see these. Give you a moment. All right. All right, Sierra Club. Happy holidays. All right, I'll let you do that. But this is really the secret to so much. This is gonna change your life, guaranteed. All right, let's keep going. So, talking about communications, I know that some of you are in the job world or kind of preparing for that job hunt world. And I also know there are a lot of resources on the MCJ Slack channel. I think there are many other coaches there. I saw some references to different resources and webinars. Take them. People know what they're doing. And so much of this is just practice, 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 practice. But one thing I would like to say is let's start by connecting with our excitement. And we did that in the opening. So just for your own good, I'm interested in learning more about. I care about. My favorite part of my job has been I've recently thrown myself into, and the other one that I can't see. Keep in mind also that, like, we know the world is in a very dire strait. That's kind of the essence of working in climate as well as certain other states. But is that really how you want to be connecting, communicating with people? There's kind of a thirst for optimism, for excitement, for curiosity, for we can do it, let's do it. So when you're able to tap into that in yourself, and then share it with others, people love to connect on that basis. All right. They love to connect on the basis of optimism, curiosity, fun, even. Okay. So then I want to give an example of the idea that when you're talking to people, try starting with your interests rather than your background. So I'm going to share two little examples here. And your communication will range between the extremely informal and the somewhat more formal scripted. But let me just show you how things can land differently. So I majored in international development in university. I then spent 2 years at a strategy consulting firm, and now I'm a manager in a community services nonprofit. I'm in charge of a workforce training initiative that provides alternatives to college. I'm passionate about moving into climate work. I'm looking for a role in an environmental organization where I can apply my analytical management skills. I'm especially interested in reforestation efforts. So I would say this is a perfectly competent example. It's even reasonably strong. There's a lot of information packed into that, right? It gives the listener or the reader some ability to see where you're coming from and how they might help you. But let's look at a different example. I'm passionate about climate, and I'm looking for a way to put my skills to work. I'm especially interested in reforestation efforts. As far as my skills, I love helping teams take on hard projects. The more complicated the problem, the more positive energy I have. By way of background, I currently manage workforce programs at a local nonprofit service organization. Prior to that, I spent 2 years as a business analyst at a consulting firm. I studied international development at university, which is where my passion for climate really took flight. They're both legitimate approaches, but I'm just going to tell you the second one for me is more fun, more interesting. It lightens you up. Even as I say it, I kind of open up my arms like this. And let's get over the idea that we have to kind of prove ourselves before we're allowed to have a conversation with somebody. Proving yourself is not necessary. And frankly, it's a little bit boring to the other person to hear, a 10 or 20-year summary of your background. All right, that is, I believe, the last slide. So what I'll do now, last slide is here. So we have this approach. The idea is 20 minutes a day, and it's habits, not big dramatic goals. A habit could be breakfast once a week with somebody. One group event you set up per quarter. Maybe you spend 20 minutes on the Slack channel, just cruising around while you have your morning coffee, setting think of you texts, etc. So the tortoise wins the race, and having consistent habits is much more valuable than big dramatic gestures. Okay, that is it for the slides. And my goodness, we have like 5 minutes. Happy to answer any questions or hear comments. I'm just going to take a quick look to see if anything is here.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hands or drop it in the chat. If you raise your hand, you can just click
raise
on
it. Yeah, raise the electronic hand. It's easier
the
to
reactions emoji, and then we can call on you, or just drop it in the chat. Whatever works.
I just got to say, I love this ping. My kiddo threw a tantrum this morning while putting on his gloves in freezing New York winter, and I thought of you in Stockholm. Okay, yes. Now let's go to Michael Tuminello.
Unmuting, perfect. So I'm just curious, like, I think in the book you talk about using spreadsheets to try to manage this. Like, I'm just wondering if you, or for that matter, anybody else has alternate tools to kind of help you keep track of, like, people and when you last talk to them and that sort of thing.
So I think this would be a great question to post in your Slack channel, wherever the right place is. My view on tracking tools is, yes, you want to have some way of keeping tabs on who you know and kind of what your productivity is in terms of reaching out, but it's got to be based on who you are. So like, I will never use Salesforce or Razor's Edge or something like that for my own personal stuff. I just know myself. I'm not that kind of, I could barely change a battery on a remote control. So I have something between pen and paper and Google Sheets and so forth, and I kind of play around with it. But other people may actually have really good examples within this group. And it can also depend on the type of job you have, because certain people need a much more structured approach than others. But thank you for the question. other questions? Okay, let me check the 17 new messages. All right, already tons of examples here. Perhaps Natalie, you can download the chat so that people who haven't been able to grab everything can get there.
Yep, definitely. I will have it. And then, yeah, obviously, if you think of other questions, feel free to.
Let me just ask you then, what is I'd love 3 people to just share what's an idea that you take away from. Oh, hold on, we got a question. Mari Clara Golfo.
Beautifully pronounced. I was talking to my partner recently, and he was saying that he almost had like an alarm go off in his head, and he was like, "Oh, it's been about 3 months since I reached out to this person, so I have to check in with them and just say something." And I found that fascinating because I never realized that that's how networking works. It felt like a little bit like a ping. I guess I'm curious, let's say if you have a lot of LinkedIn followers from past lives, et cetera, is there a strategy for how often and who you should be pinging? Also thinking about how you were saying you shouldn't have a necessary goal in mind. Is there some strategy we can use for efficiency?
Yeah, well, there are a bunch of exercises that you can do that will help to identify who you actually know, that will remind you of all these weak ties because it's not so obvious in the moment. So you can try that. But you can also kind of experiment your way to it. And I do think LinkedIn could be a really valuable resource. You can spend 20 minutes a day just checking out what other people are doing, right? Because people change jobs all the time, learning more about them, their companies. You can also spend some time commenting on their posts and reposting, and ideally saying more than "awesome" or "you're beautiful," but "oh, this is really provocative. I just shared it with my team at XYZ where I work." Not too much, but LinkedIn is a good way to get a running start toward this type of thing, and then we want to move into kind of more real world connections. All right, everyone. Part of my brand is being on time, so with 1 minute to spare, we're here. It's been a real delight being here. And let me know how everything goes, and I'll see you again in some form.
Awesome. Thanks everybody so much. Thank you so much, Michael. I was taking very tedious notes and I'm ready to put them all into action. So really appreciate your time, and yeah, have a great rest of your Wednesday, everybody. And we will see you next.
Bye-bye.